I told you they were going to win. The writers' strike is over. A tentative agreement is reached, and it has now been ratified. And it's a pretty complete win for the writers. They got pretty much everything they were asking for. The studios, they caved. They gave the writers some version of everything they wanted. Now, would the writers have liked some of these things to maybe go a little bit further? Potentially. But nothing was completely left behind. Nothing was a case of like, okay, well, we got these things and we didn't get that. No, they had a handful of major things they wanted addressed, and they've all been addressed. It's very telling that the studios caved as completely as they did, because at the start of this, they were all posturing. Oh, we're going to starve out the writers. But as I talked about before, I think they made a number of major miscalculations. One that I went into in detail in this video was about how they did not take into account how social media works. A lot of these executives have been around for a while. Some of them, if not in the exact positions they were in, were probably using as a point of reference the 2007-2008 strike. And social media was not back then what it is now. And the ability for writers to reach out to the consumers and drum up support meant that the public was very much not on the studio side by and large. You know, exceptions scattered around, but for the most part, yeah, no. Nobody saw the studios as the good guys in all this. So there was that. There's also just the fact that they've been starving out the writers just by underpaying them and understaffing the writers' rooms for so long. I think they underestimated the fact that they'd kind of already been conditioning the writers to be able to survive in very lean times. They'd already been doing it because the contract was bad. Well, let me revise that. The original contract wasn't bad, but the studios and networks and streaming services found ways to circumvent the protections that were in the old contract. That's why the new ones had to be done. In any case, why don't we talk about what it was they got? Now, I'm not going to go through point for point on every single thing that is in this contract, or at least the form that has been made publicly available. I will put a link to it down in the description if you want to go into full detail and go over the thing with a fine-tooth comb and go through all the legalese. But there are 4 major things that the writers wanted and that they got. And it's funny, for as much as I have talked about the writer's strike, I didn't go into a ton of detail about what it was they were seeking and what it was that the studios weren't willing to give them. I've talked in the broad strokes in terms of like, they won't spend money on writers, but you know, they'll give their CEOs 300 times what the average worker for that company makes. But I didn't really go into details of what it was that specifically they were trying to accomplish. So let's do that now. As I said, there were 4 major things. First was a basic raise. The basic wages are set to increase by a number of increments over the next 3 years, increasing in each of the next 3 years. So this is huge, especially because like this is something that really just benefits everybody, but especially, for lack of a better way to put it, the people at the bottom. I mean, a union isn't a hierarchy, so that's not exactly the best terminology, but like this isn't to the benefit of screenwriters and showrunners who were making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per project. This is what the basic rank and file needed desperately, was for the basic wage to go up. And it is. That was nice and straightforward. Next up, minimum staffing requirements for shows. This one's really important because this was one of the ways in which writers were being squeezed, and opportunities for writers, both existing and especially for new writers, were all drying up. Because the way it used to be, and this is not me like going, it was all good back then, like the entertainment industry has always been messed up in one way or another, but the old model, especially when it came to television, was that you would get usually 20, 24, 26 episodes in a season. You needed a decently staffed writer's room to do that, and they were going to be working for quite a while to get through that whole season. That was a decent chunk of work, and it had enough openings to give opportunities to new and upcoming writers. Well, these days, especially in the streaming era, more and more often shows are not 26 episodes. Some still are, but increasingly, new stuff that comes out is 13 episodes, 6 episodes, 10 episodes. And as these season sizes were shrinking, so too were the size of the writers' rooms. So suddenly, you just flat out have fewer opportunities. There were fewer openings, and even the people who could get these jobs, they weren't lasting as long, because a gig that you get to work on a season that's only 6 episodes long is not going to pay your bills for as long as a gig that is 26 episodes. So now they have minimum staffing requirements. And interestingly, it scales up depending on the size of the production. So for instance, it is a bare minimum of 3 writers up to anything 6 episodes long. Once you get to, say, 13 episodes or more, you have to have 6 writers. And I think it's 5 for that space in between 7 and 12. So they have that scaled up. They've taken that into account. So they're not going to be overloading a 6-episode series with, you must have 6 writers in that, when that, frankly, might not be practical. But 3 writers is probably a reasonable thing to do. And it's just going to provide more opportunities for writers, and it's going to keep networks and streaming services from squeezing the writers they had and forcing them to do more work under tighter deadlines than was standard for the industry. So it's going to make it a lot harder to crunch writers' rooms because you can't get away with understaffing them the way that they were trending towards. This next one is actually kind of huge. I think the one people are going to be talking about the most in a lot of ways is AI. I'm saving that one for last. But next up, a bonus structure for streaming shows based off viewing numbers. This is really big because streaming services do not make their viewing numbers public. Or more accurately, they are not required to. Now, sometimes they will. Either if they are justifying the cancellation of something, they might, put some stuff out, it was like number 10 out of the releases this week, or maybe they will go into specifics not too often there. If something's a huge hit, they might give specific numbers to back that up. But they don't have to do that. They do that when it's to their advantage. And that already kind of put everybody on the back foot, honestly, in a lot of ways. And it's one of the main problems with streaming services. And again, I'm going to have to do a longer video at some point talking about how all this stuff is just messed up and getting worse and falling apart. But one of the fundamental things about the streaming services is they don't have to disclose that. That is in contrast to cable and network shows, which do have to disclose their viewing numbers. Now, I actually think that's kind of messed up. I don't think any business should actually be permitted to keep what is the basic fundamental data on which the entire thing runs that secret, especially when that information is made public in comparable companies. Like, I honestly think there should be legislation addressing this so that they're not allowed to just keep this secret. But that isn't the case yet. I don't think anybody's even pushing for that at the levels where it would need to happen. So barring that, this is good because what they have arranged for is for the WGA to receive confidential viewing numbers so that its members can receive appropriate bonuses. And I'm going to underline confidential. The WGA is going to have access to data that is not being made public. So that's massive. And that's a big part of why if you worked on a streaming show as a writer, you didn't get bonuses based off it being really successful. Because you couldn't prove that it was, because you didn't have access to the numbers. The WGA now will get access to those numbers so they can fairly compensate writers who work on something and that then goes on to be incredibly successful. Good! Excellent! And as I said, kind of a big deal given how much these streaming services guard this information. And then finally, the juiciest topic, and supposedly the one that was the biggest sticking point, at least in terms of specific language, because this was something that they really needed to be sure that they got right, because loopholes in this were going to be exploited. And maybe there still are some loopholes, we'll see. AI. So I'm not going to go word for word through the whole thing, but there's a handful of points in regards to AI that I think were very smart measures for the WGA to put into place. First up, AI cannot be used to rewrite literary material, and an AI-generated script or an outline cannot be considered source material for the purposes of creative rights or credit. So the studios and networks can't just have ChatGPT throw together an outline or a script and then hand that to a writer and say, here, put this together. They also can't take a book or a novel and throw that into ChatGPT and tell it, hey, turn that into a script format. They are not allowed to do that. Now, that does not mean that AI cannot be used in any way. There's actually a couple of ways in which it can be used. Now, there can certainly be some AI-generated materials provided to the writer. That is laid out. Now, as I said, it can't be the basis for the script, but if they wanted to use AI-generated materials as like, here's something to give you a sense of the flavor of what we're looking for, or here's like some reference material that we generated through AI that we think would be helpful, like lore concepts or, more general ancillary material, that can be AI generated. But if it is AI generated, that fact has to be disclosed to the writer and to the WGA. And a writer has the ability to choose to make use of AI. If they do that, they have to do so with the consent of the company hiring them, because the company can also say, like, we don't want you to use AI, and it's not going to allow the writer to throw their writing assignment into ChatGPT and then crank that out. They're not allowed to do that either. But if the writer wants to make use of AI, decides that it's a tool that they can find helpful for what it is they are doing, and if the company hiring them consents to that, that is permissible. What is not permissible is the writer cannot be required to make use of AI as a tool in the writing process. So it is there and available, but only with the consent of both parties involved, those parties being the writer and the company hire them. Both of them have to be okay with making use of AI, and only then can AI be used. I don't even think that's a major capitulation on the part of the Writers Guild. It basically gives veto power to either side and is basically going, look, if both sides are okay, yeah, that's fine, as long as nobody's going behind somebody's back and undermining it and or requiring it. And while I don't think that's necessarily a great thing creatively, if that actually is something that happens in some cases where it does get used because all sides agree to it, that's a creativity problem. As far as the issues that the contract is meant to address, fair enough. And finally, writing done by WGA members and union members cannot be used to train AI. That's also kind of a big one, because these AI programs are only as good as what you train them on. And that becomes a big issue just in general with any creative works, whether it be art, whether it be writing, whether it be literally anything, because whatever you train it on, you've kind of stolen somebody's work and have not compensated them for that. And this is pretty much forbidding the studios from using union writers' work to do that. Are they still going to train AI on something? Who knows what? Fan fiction. They could, if they wanted. Like, they shouldn't. They shouldn't. They shouldn't be able to. But, like, they will. Because the WGA contract can only cover WGA members. So, I feel that this is a pretty good coverage of, I think, reasonable uses of AI. And looking at how it could have been used and ways in which it could have undercut and undermined the work of writers and the future of writing in the industry. I think they covered it pretty well. Now, like, I'm not an expert, and I don't know a ton about contract law, so I don't know what loopholes might be in the specific wording. Not my place to say. But Overall, again, I'll come back to what I said in the first place. They won and got pretty much everything that they wanted. That just leaves the actors. And at time of recording, it was announced earlier today that there is a meeting between SAG-AFTRA and the AMPTP on Monday. And I will be very surprised if there is not at least a tentative agreement in place by this time next week. Because with one of the two hurdles to getting anything done now cleared, the studios have a massive incentive to settle with the actors as quickly as possible so everybody can get back to work. It would make no sense for the studios to finally cut a deal with the writers and then be all bullheaded and obstructionist with the actors, because that's still going to leave them in largely the same position. Yeah, sure, the writers can start getting to work again and generate you scripts, but, if people aren't able to get in front of a camera and actually act them out, then there's only so much work that can happen. You're basically looking at only being able to resume pre-production, and that's it right now. So it's certainly in their interest to settle with the actors quickly, and I think it's going to be very much the same situation. They are probably going to give the actors basically everything that they are asking for, because what is there to hold out on? If they gave in this completely to the writers, why would they not also do so with the actors? They tried to hold out. They tried to hold out on these requests, demands, however you want to consider them. They tried to just give them basically almost nothing. And it didn't work. And now they've just got their tail tucked between their legs. They're coming in and going, fine, can we get back to work now? Our shareholders are really breathing down our necks. I bet they are. This is all incredibly gratifying. There's a lot of stuff going on in unions right now that is encouraging. Not just this stuff. One of Marvel's studios, one of the special effects studios, has voted to unionize. Good. In general, across the industry, special effects workers are some of the most exploited labor in the industry. And they're pretty much never unionized. This is good. They should be. With Marvel and Disney especially, because they are notorious at this point for cracking the whip on their teams. And the thing is, they're not even getting good results out of that because they're not giving people the time they need to do the work correctly. I might have said that the last 3 episodes of She-Hulk were the best episodes of that season, and they were pretty good. But
Transform back to Jennifer.
Why?
You are very expensive.
Oh, sure.
But wait until the camera is off you. The visual effects team has moved on to another project.
Yeah, you don't get to make that joke, Marvel, Disney. So I'm glad they're unionizing. We got stuff going on with auto workers right now, with them striking. I wish them the best of luck, too. There has been a big upsurge in the strength and power and showing the importance of unions this year. And I'm really here for it. Unions, if you hadn't guessed my general position on them, are amazing and wonderful and necessary in most industries, nearly all, any industry of size, honestly. Because the ability to exploit labor in the absence of a union, we have seen what that looks like. We've been seeing it for decades now. And it's not good. This is, though. This is fantastic. The writers have won. And I feel good. What are your thoughts on this? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those are also pretty helpful. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, You are valid. You are loved. Workers of the world unite. Until next time, this council is adjourned. Shout out to the patrons who helped make this possible. In particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfola, Goddess Elida, Tarak, the thing that goes joint in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Renabilax the Poodle, Robin Powell, T. Love, Tracy Scrappett, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, and Rosalind Bennett. There's being able to hear me try and pronounce your name, plus a whole bunch of other rewards in the Patreon. You can check out the tiers, but if you're already on the list, thank you so much.